lived it. And so today I'm excited about what God has in store, and I want us to jump into the word found in, it's going to be two scriptures. The first scripture is Galatians chapter 2, verse 6 through 8, and then Romans chapter 1:16. And it reads, "Those men who were considered to be important did not change the good news message I tell people. It doesn't matter to me if they were important or not. To God, everyone is the same. But these leaders saw that God had given me a special work, the same as Peter. God gave Peter the work of telling the good news to the Jews. But God gave me the work," this is the Apostle Paul talking, "but God gave me the work of telling the good news to non-Jewish people. God gave Peter the power to work as an apostle for the Jewish people. He gave me the power to work as an apostle too, but to those who are not Jews." And then Romans 1:16. I love this scripture. It's one of my actually favorite groups. You may not have heard them, but it's this group called 116 Click, and they make incredible music. And this is their foundation scripture. "For I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes." Say everyone. Everyone who believes, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. And he was stating that we gave the message to the Jews first and then it went to the Greeks. Today I want to talk to you along the thought, a powerless gospel. Father, we thank you. Your presence is here in this place. Thank you that I'm amongst family. Thank you that we are your family. And what you have in store for us today, we are so excited. We came with a spirit of expectation. And we thank you that you're going to meet us and more. In Jesus' name, amen. So I did an experiment a couple weeks ago. So with all of the things that are going on in the news, I decided I'm going to spend one day watching CNN. So I spent the whole day watching CNN. And they talked about some of the things that were going on in our world. Then the next day I spent watching Fox. And it is incredible how both news outlets took the same story and gave two different spins. You look at CNN and it was heavily Democratic, and it's like everything was against President Trump, everything was against Republicans. And then you look at Fox News and it's heavily Republican and everything is against Democrats and for President Trump. And I'm sitting there in this moment and I'm like, if I am a casual if I'm a casual observer of the news and I just follow one vein, I would be divided. Because it depends on who's spinning the news, what part of the news I get. And I know that the truth is somewhere in the middle. And I thought about this. I thought about how the enemy has done a work in dividing us. I love this. So one of my favorite books is How Shall We Now Live by Francis Schaeffer. And there's a quote in it that I would love to read to you about the Roman Empire, one of the most powerful empires on the face of the earth ever. And this is what he says. "Consequently, their value system, meaning the Roman Empire, was not strong enough to bear the strains of life, either individual or political. All their gods, little g, put together could not give them the significant or sufficient base for life, morals, values, and final decisions. Their gods, little g, depended on the society which made them. And when this society collapsed, the gods, little g, tumbled with them. Thus, the Greek and Roman experiment in social harmony rested on their values, society, and ultimately failed." And it says, Schaeffer goes on to say that Rome couldn't be destroyed by outward influences. It actually was destroyed from the inside, and the barbarians just finished the job. When I read that, it made me think about our world. And we have decided that the issues in our world are more political than they are social. That we've decided that when we see an issue, it's either a Republican issue or a Democrat issue. It's not a human issue. But I want to submit to you today, and I had my son make this cool shirt called Kingdom Come. Because I want to submit to you today that the issues of this world aren't Republican, aren't Democrat, and they're not simply human. That when you're a Christ follower, when you've given your life to Jesus Christ, it is not political, it is not just social, it is kingdom. And if we are Christ followers, I can't look through the lens of Fox News. I can't look through the lens of CNN. I've got to look through the lens of Jesus. And what the enemy has done, I found this quote. I love quotes, so just bear with me today. I'm a big reader, so there's a book called Justice for All by a gentleman by the name of John Perkins. And this is what he says. He says, was the gospel really so irrelevant that it could not challenge hatred and oppression? Was it powerless to bring together even black and white Christians, brothers and sisters in the Lord? What an indictment. Is the gospel so weak? Is the gospel so out of touch? Is the gospel so irrelevant to current issues that it doesn't have the power to bring us all together? Can I just say this for a minute with all the love in my heart? The problem will not get solved in the world until it gets solved in the church. The world, no, like Martin Luther King said this years ago, that the most segregated time is Sunday mornings. And I get there's a lot that goes into it. You know, music preference, the way that we want to worship, there are just all different things that goes into it. But it doesn't change the fact that when we get to heaven, there isn't going to be sections based on where you grew up or who your parents were. That the Bible says that we'll all be gathered around the throne together, worshiping our God. So I don't know about you, but I don't want to get to heaven to start. I want to practice right now. I want to practice right now what I'm going to live out in eternity. And if the world's going to get this, we have to get it first. I love the way Tony Evans puts it. He says, God isn't going to skip the church house to fix the White House. It begins with us. And I want to just talk to you about, I told you I'm a big reader. And during this time where we've walked through the social unrest, I begin to read different things to help my perspective, to help broaden my perspective, to not just give me the lens of an African-American male having grown up in the inner city, which I did, but I wanted a lens that gave me a kingdom perspective so that I could see what everyone was thinking and what everyone was walking through. And there's a book called The Third Option by Miles McPherson. And in the book, he lays out this scientific study on in-group and out-group biases. And so I just want to take us through it for a moment. See, we all have an in-group bias, meaning people that look like me, that grew up where I grew up, I have a bias towards them. And this is what it looks like. I'm going to read a few of these. My in-group biases, and maybe yours, I am more comfortable with those that are like me. I'm more inclined to spend time socially with those like me. I am more patient with those like me. I give the benefit of the doubt quicker to those like me. I express more grace for mistakes for those like me. It is easier to communicate with those like me. I assume that I will get along easier with those like me. And I am more willing to go out of my way to help those like me. Then the last one, I possess more positive assumptions for those like me. Now listen, this is just a moment to do introspect, to see where you are. This isn't a judgment moment as much as it is to become self-aware and say, okay, is there something in this for me? Then the out-group bias is the antithesis of this. It says, I'm less comfortable with those not like me. I'm less inclined to spend time socially with those not like me. I'm less patient with those not like me. I give the benefit of the doubt slower to those not like me or less to those not like me. I express less grace for mistakes for those not like me. It is easier to communicate with those not like me. And it says, I assume that I will get along, or I assume that I will not get along with those not like me. I'm less willing to go out of my way for those not like me, and I possess less positive assumptions for those not like me. And it's just a moment to check your own heart, to check our own hearts. And I'll tell you about a situation that changed the view of my life. I grew up in St. Louis's inner city in an area called Walnut Park, one of the worst neighborhoods in the city. I spent my first 20 years there. But at the age of 14, having grown up around predominantly African Americans and getting my view of other groups of people on TV. You ever been there? Like, I haven't spent a whole lot of time at that moment in my life with people that didn't look like me, didn't grow up like me. So I got my cues from TV. And my mom makes an executive decision. You know how moms do that? Against our will. My mom sends me to a school 45 minutes away from where I lived. And for the first time in my life, I was in an environment where people that looked like me weren't the dominant culture. Went to Bayless High School. I know no, probably not. Anyway, so I'm at Bayless. There are 20 students that look like me and about 400 to 500 students that don't. And now I'm thrust in this environment where I had been totally isolated from for 14 years. And in my mind, I'm going through these things, and it's like, you're already awkward at 14. You remember 14? It's already awkward, pimples coming out, It's just crazy. And now you take the awkwardness of teenagehood and you thrust me into an environment where I'm totally out of touch. And I'll never forget, all I knew was what I saw on TV. And now I'm confronted with my own bias. Are the people not like me like what I saw on TV? And then this moment happened. My junior year in high school, I was the only African American on our baseball team. And it was an eye-opening experience. This group of guys became my brothers. They were the guys that I went to lunch with, that I hung out with. It was incredible. And it began to shift my mindset about what I saw on TV. See, it's something about proximity that allows me to see things differently. And as I got closer and got to know people that didn't look like me, I was like, wow, TV was wrong. That show wasn't right. I've been watching that show for years, and that's not accurate. But here's the moment. Junior year, because 45 minutes, so after practice is over, I'm the only one. So they weren't sending a bus to take me home. I was taking a cab home. It was actually pretty cool. And then I was going to get in the cab, and my teammate's like, don't go home tonight. I'm like, don't go home tonight? Are you taking me home tonight? And they're like, no, we got it worked out. You stay. So I stayed. We were having the awards banquet that night. And I knew it was happening, but I had no desire to stay. I just wanted to get home. And I'm like, yeah, because I'm so studious. I wanted to get home and do my homework. Not. Just wanted to get home. And I go into this auditorium, and I'm just kind of walking in. And they start calling off names for awards. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm not winning anything. And then they call the baseball team. And this is the moment that shifted everything for me. They called my name. Said, you're the MVP of the baseball team this year. If that was it, it would have been enough. But everybody in that room that didn't look like me stood up and gave me a standing ovation. And in that moment, my mindset about the out group shifted. Have I had challenges from time to time with police? Yeah. Have I had challenges with, stupid people? Yeah. There are stupid people everywhere. But I learned something valuable that day, my junior year, that shifted everything, that all of anybody isn't anything. that all of one this or all of one that isn't anything. And it would shape the way that I would view my life. And God has put me in places and given me influence in areas because I had a radical understanding that people are individuals that make individual decisions, that do individual things, that TV is not the marker by which I look at people that I don't know, but proximity gives me the ability to know what I don't know. And there are moments, see, God placed me in that, but there are moments where I have to be intentional to meet somebody that isn't like me, that doesn't look like me. There are moments I have to go with somebody that doesn't look like me just to ask them, what is it like to be you? And when I do that, I actually get to walk in more of the kingdom. And so we look at this scripture in Romans where Paul has been put in this weird, somewhat awkward position by God. We all know that Paul's a Jew. He is an educated man. So he knows history. He's not blind to the history of the Roman Jewish expression, their interactions. How the Jews had at some point oppressed the Romans. And yet God tells Paul to take the gospel to a group that once oppressed them. And Paul overcomes his own issues because of the power of the gospel. And he says, guess what? I am not ashamed of this gospel of Jesus Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation for everyone. For if you hurt me, it's for you. If you're a victim, it's for you. It's for you. It's for because I can say beyond what we talk about with race and people in our group, somebody has hurt you. Somebody has done you wrong. And listen, it's anybody who's done it. Not a color, not a background, not an ethnicity. Anybody that's hurt anybody, they have to submit to this gospel. And what I learned was this. The gospel affects the head, the heart, and the hand. It affects the way I think. It affects the issues of my heart, those things that are deep-seated within me that cause me to feel what I feel. And it affects my hand. It affects what I do. The gospel is so powerful that it affects all of that. But I want to give you these things that makes the gospel powerless. Because as powerful as the gospel is, if these four things are missing, it diminishes the power that the gospel can have to change society by first changing us. And so the first thing is a gospel without compassion is powerless. A gospel without compassion is powerless. The word compassion means a feeling of deep sympathy and sorrow for another who is stricken by misfortune, accompanied by a strong desire to alleviate the suffering. See, compassion isn't me just saying I feel bad for you. Compassion is me saying, I feel bad for you. What can I do to make it better? So I was looking, Joyce Meyer Ministries. I'm a part of Joyce Meyer Ministries, and we have this project called Project Girl. And it's to help alleviate sex trafficking around the world. And so I was reading a story about a young lady by the name of Mary. Mary grew up in Nigeria. And when she became about 17, she had dreams of a better life. So she's like, okay, I can't have that life here. So she wanted to move to Italy. And so she began to search, and she had dreams of being married, going to school, doing all of these things that she knew she couldn't do in Nigeria. So she was trying to find a way to Italy. She ran across a gentleman who said he would loan her the money to go to Italy. So she's like, okay, I'll do it. So they loan her the money, take her to Italy. She works out an arrangement, so she thinks. to pay this gentleman back. She says, when I get a job, when I'm done with school, I'll give you all the money back. The gentleman's like, nah, don't like that plan. I got another plan. I want you to sell your body to give me the money back. It was all a trick because he was trying to get her into sex trafficking. And for the next few months, Mary was caught up in the sex trafficking ring. And when he brought it to her, she's like, I don't like prostitutes. I don't want to be a prostitute. Who's going to want to marry me after being a prostitute? I don't want anything to do with this. But this young lady was tricked into becoming a prostitute, and she was eventually rescued and taken out of that lifestyle. But this is what came to me. I've never been sex trafficked. My daughters have never been sex trafficked. I don't even know anyone personally that's been sex trafficked. But sex trafficking is so heinous that my heart breaks for those that endure it, that I've got to do something to make their lives better. Maybe you've never experienced injustice or inequality or all of the things that's being thrown out on the news. But compassion says, if somebody's experienced it, I got to do something to make their life better. That I may not know how you feel. I may not know what you experience. But if you are hurting as a child of God, so am I. And compassion says, we got to do something. This statement that I found, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So it's this feeling like, that's the power of empathy. I don't know what it's like. I don't know what it feels like. I don't even know if it's true. But you're hurting. And I want to do something to help. It's interesting being here and seeing, like Pastor Troy was telling me, you all haven't had a whole lot of cases of corona. And so many people are walking around without masks. Whereas in St. Louis is different. We've had cases. And this is what can happen to us sometimes. Because we haven't experienced something, we're like, is this really real? I mean, come on. Probably in Kentucky, a lot of you are like, is this corona thing really real? Because we really haven't had a whole lot to deal with. I mean, you're already out of masks. We're still full mask gear. But just because it's not a reality to you, doesn't mean it's not a reality to someone. And when we have the heart of empathy that says, listen, I don't know what that's like because it's never touched me. I don't even know if it's real. But the simple fact that someone is hurting, I want to do something to help. The second one is this. A gospel without justice is powerless. And I know that this is an interesting thought, but when the Holy Spirit gave this to me, I was like, huh? But you look throughout the Bible, and the Bible talks about justice, meaning the ability to call what's right, right, what's wrong, wrong. And when I look at Galatians, that story that I told you about, there's a part of it early on where Paul is talking to Peter. And he says, when Peter came to Antioch, he did something that was not right. He says, I stood against him because he was wrong. And he said, this is what happened. When Peter first came to Antioch, he ate and associated with non-Jews. But when he saw some Jewish men, like who came from James, Peter separated himself from the non-Jews. He stopped eating with them because he was afraid that the Jews who believed that all non-Jewish people might be circumcised or should be circumcised, he said, so Peter was a hypocrite. Justice is me looking objectively at moments and saying either it's right or it's wrong. It's not just in the middle. Because if you don't have the ability to say something's right or wrong, what ends up happening is it diminishes the power of the gospel. Because we know if there are things in our lifestyles and we're just like, oh, it's just a disorder. I just have this disorder. Well, if we don't call it right or wrong, what ends up happening is we don't deal with it, and it becomes a cancer that ruins our lives. I remember I was having a meeting with two of my team members, and they were having problems. They were going at it. And I'm like, okay, it's time for all of us to sit down and talk this through. And I sat down with them, and I was like, okay, what's going on? And they both told me their sides. And I began to say, well, okay, I started being the peacekeeper. I began to tell them, well, I see your point, and I see your point. But honestly, in that moment, I needed to be an umpire. Because there was behavior that was right and there was behavior that was wrong. But because I wanted to make both people happy and didn't want to ruffle any feathers, I was just like, hey, you both are good. This is just this thing. And honestly, they walked out of the meeting and both of them looked at each other. They were like, well, I mean, I feel better, I guess. But we don't know who was right and who was wrong in this. Fast forward a year later, had a meeting with another set of team members, and I learned from that lesson. And in that meeting, I had two people having a dispute, and I sat down with both of them, and we walked through, and I was able to say, you're wrong for that. You're wrong for how you responded over here, but you were wrong for that. And God began to show me the difference between a peacemaker and a peacekeeper. See, a peacekeeper just wants peace. Let it just be done. I don't want to hear about it anymore. Let's just do whatever we can to make peace. But a peacemaker is somebody who looks at right, looks at wrong, and says, okay, we need to do some adjustments. We need some course corrections. Because guess what? A peacekeeper is somebody that will have that problem again. A peacemaker is somebody that brings resolution to the problem, which actually brings a greater sense of peace. When we do things justly, what happens is when we call things right or call things wrong, we bring justice into a moment, and there can actually be lasting peace. The third thing, a gospel without unity. The gospel of Jesus Christ is a gospel of unity. It is not a gospel of division. And so when we look at this gospel, we're looking at Ephesians 4:11 that says, he gave pastors, teachers, evangelists, apostles, prophets. Why? For the unification of the body so that we could all flow together. And then he says in Galatians 3:28 that we are all one in Christ Jesus. For me, my ethnicity does not trump my kingdom seed. Honestly, for me, I don't have a political affiliation. I'm neither Republican or Democrat. I'm kingdom. And when I look at my life, if I allow the lens of my life to be tainted by anything other than my role. See, the Bible says, guess what? We are all seated in heavenly places in Christ Jesus. So that means I am seated above everything that's taking place in the world. And that I love the way Pastor Troy said it last week. He says, I'm in this world, but I'm not of this world. Why? Because I have a different seat. I'm not sitting looking at it from this angle. I'm sitting looking down on it from kingdom angle. And so when I'm looking at my life and the fact that I'm seated in heavenly places in Christ Jesus, I can actually look and say, guess what? I have to walk through this. But I don't look at it the way people look at it. I'll tell you this quick story. We were playing softball. And on our team at the Dream Center, it's mixed a few years ago. And there was an African-American male who was on the opposite team. And, we were winning. So a loser. And he jumps up after a play at home plate and gets mad at our children's pastor at the time, Bob LaPlante, who was white. He begins yelling and cussing. And I step up and I say, hey, I jump in. I say, no, we're not going to do this today. And this is what he says to me. He says, bruh, just like that, North St. Louis. Bruh, you going to stand with him and not with me? And I said it to him flat-footed. I said, he is more my brother than you are because of our rights and our place in Jesus Christ. And he didn't know what to do with that. What would it look like? I know I just jacked all of y'all up. What would it look like if we as kingdom people don't just stop at the color of our skin, but stop at the place of our confession of faith and say, because this person belongs to Jesus, they are my brother, they are my sister. And listen, I said it like this. It isn't that in the African American community, it's like, okay, the justice isn't wanted. No, we want justice, but we want the right kind of justice. And this is what I told a team member. I was like, we are all the body of Christ. When my hand is hurting, I'm not giving attention to my ear. When my foot is hurting, I'm not giving attention to my hip. And all I'm saying is, in the season that we're in, the African American community is hurting, and they're a part of the body. And it's just in this season, the African American community, we just need a little more attention to get to where we want to get so that we can all experience the same beauty of life that God promised all of us. Amen. That's unity. But the last one is this: a gospel without power is powerless. You're like, huh? The gospel of Jesus Christ is not just lip service. It's life service. It's not just words from a stage. It's a life lived out Monday through Saturday when we're not meeting on Sundays. And when Paul talks about the fact that the gospel of Jesus Christ is the power of God unto salvation, the word salvation in Greek is soteria, deliverance, freedom. And he says that the power of Jesus Christ is so powerful, this gospel is so powerful that it can set everybody free. Anybody who was once bound. This gospel is so powerful, it can set everybody free. It can take a poor person and make them prosperous. It can take a sick person and heal them. It can take a lost person and find them. And it can take hate and turn it into love. And I want to close with this story. Many of you have heard of Corrie ten Boom. She's a Holocaust survivor. And in, I think, the early 1940s, her family was taken into the concentration camps by the Nazis. As she's in there, she watched her beloved sister die slowly. And by the grace of God, Corrie ten Boom survived. And she writes books on how to forgive. She writes books on this is how it takes a while. You got to dig up some wounds, but this is how you can learn how to live in the freedom that she had found even after coming out of the concentration camps. But one day, she was in a service. A man walks up to her, extends his hand and says, "Remember me." And immediately, she remembered who the man was. He was one of the jailers in the concentration camp. And he said, "Hey, I've given my life to Jesus Christ. Will you forgive me?" See, these principles are all good till you got to live them. And here she is, writing books, talking about how she's forgiven, and now she's faced with something. And the writer says that in her body she felt cold. She could not extend her hand to his. And she's inside saying, all of this whole dialogue in her heart is going on. I know I'm supposed to forgive. I know that if I don't forgive, I can't be forgiven. I know all of this. But in that moment, she is stuck. And it says that all the anger, all the rage, and all the hurt begin to well up in her just in those few moments. And she says that in a moment, she just coldly reached out her hand. And when they touched hands, she said that immediately she felt a warmth in her body. She felt a sensation that she hadn't been able to feel. And she felt the love of God fall on her life like never before. And she clasped his hand and said, "Yes, I forgive you. With all my heart, I forgive you." And what I remember when I read that story is that the gospel is so powerful that it can save the assailant and the victim. The gospel is so powerful that it can heal the person that is hurting and the person that hurts. And when we diminish the gospel by making it about politics or making it about just race, and we lose the fact that the gospel is in place to do for the United States and for us what Rome didn't have, that we don't get our cues from Instagram or Facebook or CNN or Fox, that we don't get our cues from our neighbors or our friends, that we get our cues from the God of this universe who saved you and saved me, who calls us all one in him. And when we allow the power of the gospel to do his work inside of us, society looks at the church and they're like, that's the way this world should look. The gospel is so powerful. It can change the trajectory of every life if we allow it. If we allow it. You know, if I'd have tried to preach this message 3 weeks ago, couldn't have done it. Because this whole George Floyd thing that's happened, it brought up some scars in my own heart. And I had to step back and examine my heart. And this is real talk. Am I going to be not just? Am I going to focus on being black? Or am I going to focus on being kingdom? Am I going to focus on being black? Or am I going to focus on being kingdom? And I spent days in the presence of God saying, I want to be kingdom. And God spoke to me and he said, the kingdom message that I gave you 2 years ago, now it's time. Because he's called me to be a bridge. That I want to help walk African Americans through the process of healing so that we can come together. But I also want to help you all as white Americans, as white Christians, understand that the plight is real. And that when you walk in empathy and compassion, we actually attack social ills together. That we walk arm in arm, hand in hand, as gospel followers of Jesus Christ, saying injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And if it affects my brother and sister, if it affects my hand, it's only so long before it'll have an impact on the rest of my body. But we have a chance right now to change the game. And it starts with all of us. And so today, you know, I know some of these combos are not comfortable. Honestly, I hate them. Because since that time in high school, my thought, I don't focus on certain things. Since high school, I've only focused on, man, if I like you, I like you. If I don't, I don't. If you smell, you smell. If you don't, you don't. Doesn't matter where you grew up or what color. My God, my God is so creative. So creative. That he created me black, created you white. I have a friend that's Hispanic. I have a friend that's Asian. He is so creative that he created all of us to look the way that we do in his image and his likeness, and that when we're all together, there is not a devil in hell that can stop us from taking over any environment in any place. There's what the devil hates, like right now, the fact that Pastor Troy invited me in to speak, he hates this. He doesn't want this, because when we do come together, oh my God, the kingdom of darkness starts to run. And so I just ask you I ask you in this moment, maybe you have a wound. Wherever the wound is. If you want to be healed from that wound, I just want you to stand up. And listen, I get it. In a room like this, you're like, well, you're asking me to stand. Please don't do that. Yeah, I am. There's something about faith in acting when you stand. So I want to give you this opportunity in the presence of God. Maybe it's, listen, it doesn't have to be about race or whatever. Maybe you've got a dad wound, a mom wound, a divorce wound, a childhood wound. And you're like, I just want to be healed. I just want to move forward. If that's you and maybe you're stuck in some shape, form, or fashion, just stand with me. I just want to pray over you. Yeah. And I wanted to do it that way so no matter what your wound is, nobody's looking and saying, oh, it must be about this or it must be about that. If you stood up because you have a race wound, nobody knows it right now because we're all standing for something. So I just want you to put your hands up just like this. Even you at home. I know, I get it. You're at home. Yep, put the hamburger down. Yep, please. Just join in. This is you giving that hurt to God. And I want you to repeat after me, Father God, first of all, thank you that I survived. You helped me to survive this. And I'm so grateful. But today, I don't want it anymore. And I give it to you. I give you my tears, my pain. I give you my anger and my frustration. I lay it at your altar. And today, give me your peace, your joy, and your healing. I receive it right now. In Jesus' name, amen. Now, can you give God a praise right where you are? Just thanking him for it. Just thanking him for it. Amen. And listen, you're free. So live like free people. And if you're here today and you don't know Christ as Savior, maybe you're online or in the room and you've never accepted Christ, you could sit down, everybody. Maybe this whole moment was just for you. God sent me 3 hours and 6 minutes away just so we could bring this message to you. Don't be embarrassed by it. We've all had to come this way. But it is one of the greatest decisions you will ever make. So if that's you, I just want you to pray this prayer with me. Say, Father God, I come to you now in need of a Savior. I believe that Jesus died and rose to make me right with you, to give me life with you. So today, I surrender my life, and I thank you for saving me. In Jesus' name, amen.